Wherever we go in the Christian world, we come across our hidden brethren. In all the stained glass windows of the world, they hover around and they're part of the scene. They are, if you like, always there, and we don't think of them. This one is St. Michael. He is in Austria. Actually, these windows are put together by Don Lawrence, who's still alive, full of windows of all kinds. It's a big monastery, and they're all over the place. But then we have underneath him all the others, and it's this group that we're thinking of today. They're everywhere, and because they're often portrayed in a certain way, we've got used to thinking them in a certain way. Chubby little creatures. But remember, they're real. This one shows the finishing of the Gospel with angelic apparitions. As at the beginning, we have another one, Gabriel, appearing first of all to Zechariah and then to our Blessed Lady. It's possible that he actually was the guardian angel of the Blessed Virgin. We're not quite sure. But the big ones are given big jobs. And indeed, the word angel means someone who announces something. Angelo in Greek is to announce, to proclaim something. And so they're given work to do. And indeed, the guardian angels, who are, if you like, the kind of pawns on the chessboard, closest to us, are very much on our side of things. They're around, very close to us, and they're all the time given things to do. And because of that, we have access to them just for the taking. We have access, of course, to all the angelic world, but those who are of the higher orders, it would seem, have all their energy given to praise, worship, and adoration. They are burning there before the throne of glory. The word seraph is from the word saraf, it means to burn. The seraphim are the burning ones. And those who have had some kind of ecstatic experience, even in the Old Testament, have been given some notion of glory. Indeed, we are not aware of it, but every time we come to the sacred liturgy, we are repeating something of their song, already heard by the prophet Isaiah at his call. He heard this strange chanting, or at least he talks of it. Whether he heard the music, we're not quite sure. He was certainly given an idea of what they were saying. They were proclaiming the holiness of God. Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh. Hagios, Hagios, Hagios. And this, again, was heard in the desert in the first centuries. And even though we don't have it in our liturgy except on Good Friday, we have it now in the Divine Mercy Chaplet, which, remember, comes from a bridge country between East and West. That chant, which comes again and again in the Eastern liturgy, Holy God, Holy Mighty One, Holy Immortal One, Hagios Theos, Hagios Ischiros, Hagios Athanatos, Eleison imas, have mercy on us. That was heard by the angels, by the Desert Fathers, and it came into the liturgy, and it's stuck there ever since. And when it's sung in plaintive mode, often actually in harmony, accompanied by clouds of incense, it does suggest that we're actually echoing on earth what's going on beyond the veil. And remember, in the liturgy, the veil is very thin. They're right there. In fact, this morning at 7 o'clock, the little chapel was fairly full, and it was very still, the celebration. And for a quiet moment, we were all there in intense absorption of the mystery. It was at Holy Communion, and I think we all felt something of the stillness, as it were the wings. We were aware that we weren't alone. There was a dense presence in the little chapel, and it was double. The Lord himself was there and in us, and protecting the presence were our friends, the little ones, and we could almost touch them. And yet we don't think of them. Before coming, after getting things ready, I was just about to put them in the car, and something crucial I couldn't find. It was actually the car key, and it's always in the same place, but it wasn't there. Where has it gone. And I got frightfully frustrated. But then the thought came to me, your angel can see it. Invoke him. And I did. And instantly this thought came to me, look in the drawer. And it was actually there when I would never put it. In fact, this morning I was talking to somebody who came, and I was asking, had she lost her angel, just out of mischief? And she said immediately, and she gave his name. Oh no, he's there. Oh, and I was wondering how she knew his name. And she told me, and I've heard it from other people too, it can be done. So it's this, especially if you're young, innocent, and pure, because you're close to the angels. You can put yourself in prayer mode and ask quietly your guardian angel, who's right there, you can't see him, but he's there, and he loves the little ones, but also adults who are in a state of grace, it can be done. Ask him to inspire in your mind his name, because he knows it and you don't. And what happens? Apparently, it can happen that one will be given mentally, strangely, the name. And this person had asked for confirmation of it from somebody who had gifts, and she was given confirmation, yes, that's his name. So, they are our friends. And they're a bit frustrated because they're not given anything to do. The more we have devotion to them, the more pleased they are, and the more we cultivate sensitivity to them. There are lots of testimonies of angelic interventions, little nudges and inspirations, and we need to sharpen our spiritual senses, because the more we sharpen them, the more they can get through to us, and they can hint, and they can push and shove, and they can stop us from making blunders. Now, it's kind of important, because if we have this angelic guard, it's for a reason. We're in danger in this side of time. I was just thinking this week about the way that 1/3 of this huge band, they think it's infinite really, massive number, fell. And I was going back in my mind's eye to that first primeval moment before time began, because time is a measure of what? You who know physics. Time is a measure of movement. So there was no movement, so there was no time, until objects started to exist and therefore move. So we're going back to pre-time, as we know it. In God there's no time. One eternal moment, eternal present, and that's how prophecy is possible. We're plugging into his knowledge. Now, it would seem that something similar to what happened to us happened to them, way back in pre-time. Remember, God was God, he was blessed and holy, he was self-sufficient, he was Trinity, and yet he was fontal goodness, and so he was, as it were, dissatisfied until he had someone to share this with. And so he created beings out of nothing. The first round were the angels. Now he didn't want, just as in our case, he didn't want people to have automatic entry into the fullness without some kind of collaboration, some kind of part, a willingness, so that they could actually be responsible also. So there was some test way back. They probably saw way down the incarnation and wouldn't accept adoring this smaller version of glory. This immediate owning, this immediate I am sufficient, which is kind of familiar, isn't it? It's basic human conditions as we are, and as we are, if we're honest, the center of the solar system. Now, what happened there was irreversible, as we know, and it was actually cosmic, because for the first time there was a jarring note entering the cosmos. And what probably happened was this. Lucifer was winning, he thought. He was getting a huge number of his angels to follow. They would have their own kingdom. He didn't for 1 second imagine that God could do, in any way, have anything in the universe which was unpleasant. He was goodness itself. And what was his surprise when he found that he was being removed from there and being cast as far as possible, but not into just his own kingdom, but his own kingdom of a quite different sort. And then, and only then, did hell begin to exist. It did not exist slightly in the cosmos until that thing went wrong. And I've often thought to myself, where is this place? Where is hell? And I've been thinking to myself, is it possible, I'm just throwing it out to you, is it possible that that was the Big Bang in creation? When we had time starting, when matter started to exist, we don't know. But what happened? Out of this spin-off, whatever happened, if that's the way it happened, there was one part of the universe which had something that looks very much like hell. The middle of this planet. Scientifically, it's a huge heat. And we know from scientific evidence that strange things go on in the deepest level of the earth. Strange creatures have been seen protruding, because now we have ways and means of going further and further into the heart of the earth than ever before, and things are picked up. And these famous sounds, we don't know whether it's true or not, but it was reported that in that strange affair in Siberia, the boring into the crust of the earth, this horrible sound was heard by the Soviets. Whether it happened or not, it doesn't matter. It probably corresponds to reality. Because we know from the mystics that there is a movement of the soul after death. It does go into the bosom of the Trinity, and therefore there's an upward movement, or it goes eventually down. There is a movement, and this downward movement was always a part of the human awareness right through the centuries. People have always talked about it in some shape or form, going down, and we know what it means. So, is it possible that that is the realm that started to exist then? Now, do you see what's going on? Around the planet, a huge number of souls all the time is going somewhere. We can't see it, but they are. In the trenches in the First World War, there were souls all the time coming out in great concentration from those trenches. All the time there were souls going out and going somewhere, going somewhere, going somewhere. And I heard from one or two, including my father, that there had been strange things going on. Heaven was closer to earth than one knows. Things, angels, whatever, were seen, les anges de monde, they were there. And the soldiers themselves became somewhat aware what death was before they got there. Indeed, we have great testimonies of heroic sanctity in that borderline between this world and the beyond. It was also the case in great moments of battle in the Second World War, such as Dunkirk. Many, many, many were lost in the course of an hour. But the soul is always immortal, and each death is a cosmic moment. Listen to this. David Niven told me the engrossing story of a single episode in the chaotic flight from France after Dunkirk in 1940. One motley assembly, Royal Air Force ground personnel who were trapped, Red Cross workers, women, ambulance drivers, and finally the embassy staff from Paris with their children. There were over 3,000 of them by the time they got to Saint-Nazaire at the mouth of the Loire. The British government sent an old liner called the Lancastria to come and take them away, with 3 destroyers to guard her. They were just pulling up the anchor when 3 dive bombers came. The destroyers did what they could, but one bomb hit, went down the funnel, and blew a huge hole in the side. And she quickly took on a terrible list to one side. In the hold, there were several hundred soldiers. Now, there was no way they could ever get out because of the list, and she was sinking. And along came my own favorite Good Samaritan, a Roman Catholic priest. A young man in Royal Air Force uniform. He got a rope and lowered himself into the hold to give encouragement and help to those hundreds of men in their last fateful hour. Knowing he couldn't get out. Knowing he could never get out, nor could they. The ship sank, and all in that hold died. The remainder were picked up by the destroyers and came back to England to the regiment I was in. And we had to look after them, and many of them told me that they were giving up even then in the oil and struggle. And the one thing that kept them going was the sound of the soldiers in the hold singing hymns. Earlier in time, something somewhat similar took place, showing how precious one soul is. It was in Uganda in 1887. It was Father Giraud, a missionary of the White Fathers. He was in a canoe. All of a sudden, a hippopotamus struck the boat and wrecked it, leaving the missionary, an orphan boy, and 4 of the rowers drowning. The rowers were able to save their lives. According to them, Father Giraud could have done the same, but he preferred heroically to sacrifice his life in order to save the soul of the little orphan boy who had not yet been baptized. The child was desperately clinging to the priest. He must have been to him his angel, a human angel for a helpless child. Thus constraining the missionaries' movements almost completely. Summoning all his strength, Père Giraud managed to free his right arm and stay afloat as long as it took him to pour the water in which he was to drown over the head of the boy, while saying the words of the baptismal formula. Soon afterwards, both of them unfortunately drowned. However, instants later, they must certainly have appeared together before the throne of God, one of them in his unspotted baptismal robe, the other as a martyr of heroic charity. Deo.